It is a pleasure to be with you today. I really have become thoroughly enmeshed in this conservation effort, uh, and I don't know whether it's reflective of my. I think it's reflective of my background, my immediate background, the upbringing I've gotten from my mom and dad, and from the Indian community at large. But it's very near and dear to my heart. Uh, when I look at the Chesapeake Bay, I had a conversation with Pat Noonan back in 2005, and he had a video that was very inspiring, very moving. And when it was over, I said, I see only one thing wrong with that video. And he said, what's that? I said, it started on page 2. It didn't mention the Native Americans who plied those waters for many years before Captain John Smith was there, and those indigenous communities who worked even then to help preserve that beautiful gift from Mother Nature. And he was really struck by that, and we formed a fast friendship. And he did alter that video to include page 1. So I was very, very impressed that he responded to that input, and it led me to believe that we do have a voice. We, people of, Black and brown people, have a voice in this movement, voices that are heard. And me being here today gives further evidence that our voices are heard. I was Sunday, a couple of weeks ago, I was down at a place we call Mamanahunt, and that's a property of 944 acres that the Commonwealth of Virginia wrote a check, gave to the Chickahominy Tribe to purchase that land. And it's very significant to the Chickahominy culture because Captain John Smith, even though he was given to hyperbole, he did have a very detailed map of the areas along the Chesapeake Bay and those tributaries that in that watershed. And he cited this on the 1612 map, Mamanahunt, and he called it a principal town or city of the Chickahominy Tribe. Imagine this. 2021, we regained that property. And when you look, thank you. I have a friend who farms the property, and I talked to him on Sunday afternoon 2 weeks ago, and he said, I've just had a great day. I've been on the Chickahominy River with my wife. He said, we've lived on this land all my life, and he talked about his parents and grandparents living on that land. And he said, it's just a great experience. And I said, I'm proud for you, but I lament the fact that in 1646, we were forcibly removed from this land that's been home to you for lo these many years. And that's what's happened in those rivers, those tributaries to the Chesapeake Bay within the Commonwealth of Virginia, and those sites along the Chesapeake Bay that were originally peopled or populated by indigenous folks. So when I looked at went on the computer, I looked at the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, our land, our heritage, our future. And I love what it says. But I look at the folks who were disenfranchised from our land, our heritage, our future for so many years, and it really causes me sometimes to look with anger at what history has done to the indigenous peoples. That concept of ours, and it for many years didn't include me. It included people of a different color, those people who were in power. But we're making strides to be a part of that equation. When I look at the term equity means everyone is treated the same. Equality means everyone is treated the same exact way, regardless of differences. That's equality. But what is equity? Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. So what does that mean? You know, and that's, I'm glad you chose equity. If you and I, if Joel and I are racing and I'm on a smooth surface, we both start at the same point, at the same starting line. But his lane is full of sand. So I'm racing on a good surface. Joel is racing me running in sand. Have you ever tried to run on a beach when sand is kind of wet? And so we started at the same place. We had an equal starting, but there wasn't equity in those conditions that supported that race. So what I see today with that title is we're going to provide equity. If I'm running in the sand, my partner will be too. So equity looks at the differences and tries to have a model that all people are given an opportunity that puts them on par. When I was a kid, I loved drag racing, and you know this person comes with a car that is just much more powerful than the contender. So that contender, they spot him several seconds to give equity in that race. And I know I'm belaboring the issue, but I want you to understand the significance of what the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership is trying to do. And I applaud those efforts. So to get to my prepared words, I ask, who are you? Who am I? And what are we doing here? Is it because we recognize that we have plundered and misused those vast resources our Creator entrusted to us? Or is it because the fortunate few who have lived along our waterways since the invasion of 1607 have denied access to not only the people from whom they stole this land, but also to those who do not have the means to acquire such property? Or is it because we recognize the need to properly interpret the beautiful parks and public spaces across this country? Do we think we need to properly interpret these places? The Chesapeake Bay watershed, across the country, the Chesapeake watershed notwithstanding. Or more importantly, maybe it is because we want to protect, preserve, and conserve our vast natural resources so they may be treasured by the next 7 generations and beyond. Perhaps that's the reason. I believe we're here because as beneficiaries, as beneficiaries of Mother Nature, we know we must sustain her. Why? Because she sustains us while providing beautiful places for recreation. So when I think about conservation, preservation, I also think of recreation. We should be able to enjoy those resources out there in a way that we are mindful of the need to protect and conserve. And they don't have to be mutually independent. We're all in the same boat. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, I should say, but there are mutual benefits for all of us to understand conservation, preservation, and recreation. So yes, we rely on Mother Nature for the air we breathe. Joel talked about some of the contaminated air that we had to breathe. The water we drink, the food we eat, the roofs over our head, and recreation. Mother Nature has provided all of that to us. I want to share a little bit of the story of the Chickahominy Tribe. It's a story that shares some commonalities with tribes within the Commonwealth of Virginia and beyond. But we all have unique characteristics. My story is not the story of the Mattaponi tribe. or the Rappahannock tribe, even though we have lots of commonalities. People tend to think if you speak to one tribe or one chief, you've got a sense of what all tribes look like. So you're speaking to one tribe who oftentimes has a burden of folks thinking he or she is speaking for all tribes. So first off, it's not a monolithic situation. We're not monoliths. We are distinct tribes with distinct personalities and distinct needs and commonalities. The survival struggle of indigenous peoples across the globe began at the hands of the church in 1452 when Pope Nicholas V issued a papal bull to King Ferdinand V of Portugal, and that gave Portugal the right to seize land from indigenous peoples of undiscovered places, in quotes, across the globe. That right was later expanded to most of Western Europe. So on May 14, 1607, the settlers went ashore at Jamestown, what's now Jamestown, Virginia. There were upwards of 35 tribes in Tidewater, Virginia at that time. And there was a brief honeymoon period, but the cultures clashed. And I believe that was primarily because the settlers were armed with the doctrine of discovery and were seeking to gain land. In 1609, there were starving times, and the tribes actually sustained the settlers during that time. They were cultivating tobacco, and every tillable piece of soil they were converting to fields to grow tobacco at the expense of not having the foodstuffs they needed to sustain them. So in 1610, Lord Delaware, who was the governor of Jamestown, decided that he needed to wipe out the Paspahegh tribe. He sent a militia there with the express purpose of annihilating the tribe. The chief was on a hunting expedition, so he wasn't there, but women and children were murdered indiscriminately. They were given explicit instructions, do not bring any hostages back to Jamestown. They did have a couple of young boys, the sons of the chief and the chief's wife. So they had the chief's wife and the two boys in a boat going back to Jamestown. And they said, we were given instructions not to bring hostages. So they threw the two boys in the water, and the writer says they blew their brains out. They called her the Queen, ashore, heading to Jamestown, and they said, wait, if we get to Jamestown, she'll be burned at stake. So they decided they would dispatch with her more humanely, and I quote, they ran her through with a sword. I say that because if you look at the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, and I think the third paragraph from the bottom, said the crown, the king, has incited these savages along the frontier whose methods of warfare didn't discriminate against killing women and children. Hello, that template was set in 1610. But the readers of history will read the Declaration of Independence, but they don't read the story of the Virginia Indians. Most of you have you heard of the Trail of Tears, 1830? Well, that template was set in 1646 in Virginia when the Parliament, the House of Burgesses, the first representative English-speaking government that was seated in North America, they decided that the Chickahominy Tribe should be removed from its land and moved about 60 miles north and east of there. Not far, unless you have to walk it. So we were taken from our land then. And as I said earlier, none of that land was returned to us until 2021. So history books don't tell that story. And I've been beating the drum, no pun intended, to bring that awareness to governors who have served in Virginia for years. It's hard to move a needle in what was once the cradle of the Confederacy. but I'm working diligently, we are, to tell our story. And it turns out that the forum that we're usually able to tell that story happens to be places like this. It's not a good story. People don't like to hear the bad parts, but history is all at once comedy and tragedy. And if you leave out any component, you're doing a disservice to the student of history. So I would love your support if, as we move ahead, to talk to your legislators and those people, quote, in power, who have the ability to ensure that history is taught. And that's all I want. People will say, well, I want the true history. I want the real history. I want the history without qualification. That's what needs to be taught. So in 1677, there was a treaty between the colonists and the Virginia tribes. It's called the Articles of Peace, the Treaty of Middle Plantation. In that treaty, we would deem by the crown, by the king, as sovereign subjects of the crown. So how do you reconcile those terms, sovereign and subjects? But we took it, we accepted it. We're sovereign subjects of the crown. And I'll fast forward to 1814, the Treaty of Ghent. The Treaty of Ghent stipulated, one, that the United States would give the same accord to the indigenous people that existed in 1700. 1700, we were recognized as sovereign subjects of the crown. Something happened in 1776 called the American Revolution. And when the United States was formed, it didn't renew that treaty with my tribe and other tribes who were signatories to the Treaty of 1677. An interesting phrase in that treaty, it says that as an acknowledgement and tribute for such protection, that said Nakotawants and his successors are to pay unto the king's governor this number of 20 beaver skin at the going away of geese yearly. And a tribute is paid to the governor of Virginia every year in November, which is part of this treaty. My grandfather in 1921 decided that it was more show than go. You know, it was a big ceremony, a lot of pomp and circumstances, but nothing substantive from this gift that was made yearly. So the Chickahominy people stopped participating. But again, in 1776, that American Revolution, that great Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal by their Creator. Are created equal, and they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, Joel, I wish they would have thought of equity then, and maybe it would have had a little bit more substance. But those rights weren't accorded to people like me or any brown or black person. We weren't part of that calculus. And if you fast forward to 1865, the Gettysburg Address, I believe it's 65, Abraham Lincoln reflected, 7 years ago, our forefathers brought forth in this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to that proposition that all men are created equal. We're gathered here today to test whether that nation or any other nation can long endure. And it wasn't 1865, which is at the beginning of the Civil War. And he cited that they were engaged in a battle to see if those rights would be made possible. So then in 1865, the slaves were granted freedom. And the 13th Amendment in the Constitution said the slaves were free. And there was a good period of time during Reconstruction, but then the Jim Crow laws came into effect, and those rights were kind of cast aside. If you fast forward to 1924, people like me were afforded citizenship in these United States of America. So that's when I gained citizenship. But at the same time, Walter Plecker had put together a doctrine that was embraced by institutions of higher learning, by the state legislature, by the government, by the governor. So I'm talking the judicial branch, executive branch, and legislative branch. But that Racial Integrity Act said there are no Indians in Virginia. And people at the circuit court clerk's office, the clerks were forced to go through the birth certificates and scratch out Indian. My parents went to Washington, D.C. to be married as Indians because they were forbidden to do so in Virginia. They came back to Virginia and lived illegally as a married couple who were Native American. They were forbidden to give Chickahominy kids or any child, Indian child of Virginia, an Indian name, a native name. My name, Stephen R. Adkins. It's Adkins, Adkins, often called AT. But they were some of the hardships that we endured in trying to be who God made us to be. We left King William County around 1750, migrated back to the Chickahominy Ridge in Charles City County, and by some miracle we were able to buy land fee simple. If you fast forward to the beginning of the 20th century, in 1901, the Chickahominy Tribe reorganized, and that reorganization changed our governance structure. We were at one time, we were ruled by what's called a Mungai. It was 8 people selected to serve as leaders of the tribe, and they would identify a leader among themselves who would serve as a spokesperson, a person as it were, for a period of time. But in 1901, we decided to go to the structure of having a tribal chief elected by the citizens of the tribe. And we'd have a chief and assistant chief, and that would be on the tribal council, which today consists of 12 people, both men and women. At the same time, about the same time, we organized Samaria Baptist Church. And that's an interesting story. 88 members of our tribe, 88 tribal citizens attended Samaria Baptist Church, which was a white church. The church disbanded, and the owners of the land allowed the Chickahominy Tribe to continue to worship there. When we built our own structure, we kept the name, and the land for that structure was donated by an official within Charles City County. So that's how we gained the property to build the church. And if you saw it today, it's a pretty expansive structure. But that's when the tribe reorganized and began the process of putting the current structure that we have together today. It has endured. When we were going for federal recognition, we had to provide documentation of our existence as a tribe from 1900. And part of their Southern criteria, and we use those same criteria when we were going for state recognition. And we went through a pretty lengthy process. We met with the members of both the House and Senate, a study commission for 3.5 years. And finally, four tribes, the Chickahominy Tribe, the Chickahominy Tribe Eastern Division, the Upper Mattapotato, and the Rappahannock tribes were accorded state recognition. From that point, we continued the effort to gain federal recognition. And we went the administrative route for years, and we didn't get much traction. In 1999, decided to seek congressional recognition. But the whole time, we were working to petition with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Office of Federal Acknowledgement, formerly called the Bureau of Acknowledgement and Research. So from 2001 until January 29th, 2018, I testified before every Congress that convened between 2001 and 2018. Our bill passed the House in May of 2017, and it passed the Senate in January of 2018. At the same time, we had our last meeting with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and were told that our documentation would surely give us federal recognition. My reply is we'll take the one that comes first. And Congress approved it. The president signed it about 6:45, January 29th, 2018. And I'd love to tell you more about our history and the things that we've endured, but I'd like to get on the real reason I'm here today. And I would say that we kind of outlived, or we did outlive those people who, we outlived our terms of office. And when the ones who were so adamant that we wouldn't get federal recognition, when our terms were up, we got more friendly folks in there. And even the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Indian Affairs came to some of our hearings, and they never opposed what we were doing. And I think that's very significant. So when I look at what we're doing around the Chesapeake Bay, and the same concept for preservation conservation across the United States, I'm struck with how we've learned to work with other entities to garner the funds we need. I mean, everything, there's a dollar sign on it. But to work with other entities really, really helps leverage the cause that we're all pursuing. When I think about the funding, look at everybody is familiar with the Marshall Plan, I reckon, where the United States goes back and helps reconstruct, rebuild those areas where conflict has occurred. It started first with World War II when George C. Marshall put the idea, advanced the idea, and the United States Congress supported it. But that provides funding to rebuild those areas. Why shouldn't some of that funding be here to help us today as you're rebuilding the areas around the Chesapeake Bay, trying to restore it to the vitality it was back in 1607? Why aren't some of those funds used to help rebuild those areas from which people were forcibly removed? When you look at the amount of dollars that are going outside of the United States to support people who are engaged in war, and I think we should do it. But Joel and Wendy, what would 14 billion do for our cause? What would it do? So you may think I'm crazy, and I've often been called that with full justification, but why not? Why not have an initiative within the United States tantamount to the Marshall Plan where we rebuild those places? You know, places inhabited by Black and brown people have never been barriers to folks who want to construct interstate highways or who want to build a landfill or something else that would disrupt that community. Why can't we go back and use funds like that to rebuild those things we need to preserve our environment? And I'm not excluding the dominant culture. There are many people of poor means who aren't Black or brown who have been stomped on by a society who has little regard for people without means. So I put that idea out there. I'd like for us to build on it. And that would be geared to Black, brown, and white. Folks are in it together. And we're looking for equity among ourselves as we strive to protect this great these great natural resources that God has entrusted to us. We need to move forward with proven methods of attracting funds to ensure the momentum we have will not falter. It is critically important to note the success the National Park Service has enjoyed while working with the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership and NGOs such as the Chesapeake Conservancy. The Chesapeake Conservancy has a proven track record of garnering funds from organizations and private donors while building and leveraging relationships to conserve and protect both historically and culturally significant properties. And these don't discriminate between Black, brown, or white, culturally significant properties. The federally recognized tribes of Virginia were introduced to the National Park Service's Director, Chuck Sams, by Jerry Marr, Superintendent of the Colonial National Historical Park, with oversight of Fort Monroe National Monument and the Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historical Trail. And this occurred shortly after his appointment, but I was struck by Superintendent Marr saying it was critical to double down on her efforts to engage tribal partners around the Chesapeake watershed. And Director Sams echoed that position. I work with Superintendent Marr on several committees. We serve on on the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. And we are bringing the faces of Black and brown people into that. You know, while the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution didn't change my lot in life originally, I feel today that that Constitution speaks to me. You know, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, we the people talks about you and I. Folks, it's my phone, I apologize. But, and we the people implies, you know, implicit in that statement is that you and I elect the representatives and the government serves us. And it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So even today, that journey to the more perfect union is comprised of people like you and I. I emphasize Black, brown, white people. We are the citizens of the United States. We are the people the Constitution refers to in order to form a more perfect union. And I believe that more perfect union would take a look at our natural resources and help us build and preserve and protect those culturally and historically significant places. Do you agree? We need to do it. And if I were a preacher, I'd say the time is now. We aren't promised tomorrow. The time to act is now, and we should just remove procrastination from our lexicon. Just remove it. Act now with urgency, deliberateness, and immediacy. As Joel said, the clock is ticking. We see wildfires, well, I won't go there to take too long, but we need to work to preserve these natural resources. We need to work to identify additional acreage to be conserved. We know where it is. We know where they are. We just need to have the means, the funds to make that happen. And how am I running on time? I'm gonna shut up when you tell me to. Okay. Usually my wife is sitting by me, and after a few kicks on my shin, I know it's time to sit down and shut up. But I believe the leadership and innovative thinking of people such as Jerry Marr, Wendy O'Sullivan, Michael Slattery, and I could go on forever with these names. I believe that can catalyze changes that will resonate across the nation. I would love to see this part of the United States and the world, be a role model for making these changes occur, for raising the sense of urgency with we the people to get us where we need to be. It's a fun journey to me. I get enjoyment every time. If it's a half acre of land, and Joel, we've seen applied as much as, or as little as 5 acres or 2 acres that have been taken in. I was pleased to see the announcement from the Chesapeake Bay program regarding the current amount of land in the watershed protected, reaching 9.1 million acres. This is great news. This is great news. But it also shows we still have 3 million acres to go. I believe a significant amount, if not all of the 3 million acres, should benefit from more diverse constituencies than the first 9 million. And I say that acknowledging we're in it together, white, black, and brown. I commend the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, which has been working on this issue for the last 14 years. Think about it. I believe the government work group called the Protected Lands Work Group, created in June of this year, can and will help push this initiative across the finish line. But they need our help. You need to engage with your congressional delegation and share what you know about what's going on and cite the need for more funding. You need to engage with NGOs like the Chesapeake Conservancy, which has a proven track record of gaining funds and, attracting significantly well-heeled, as it were, donors. People with deep pockets who want to do the right thing. And sometimes it takes a voice like Joel Dunn to help them know what the right thing is. But we need, the National Park Service cannot do it alone. And Superintendent Sullivan, Director Sullivan knows that. O'Sullivan, I'm sorry, knows that. Wendy O'Sullivan knows that. And she's been working in a way that engages those organizations because she knows she can't do it alone. Michael Slattery knows he can't do it alone. We have to have help from we the people. It is my sense that the vast majority of funding for land conservation in the watershed comes from state, land trust, tribes, and other private entities. So I'm not going to be redundant, but know that it comes from the states, land trusts, tribes, and other private entities. We need to ensure, to the best of our ability, that we reach out to our congressional delegations, and I am being redundant, to ramp up funding to underwrite the initiatives of people like Wendy O'Sullivan, Michael Slattery, Jerry Marr, and others, to put systems in place, and we hear that term all the time, but I think it's appropriate here, to put systems in place to ensure we continue the journey we are on, and become the best stewards we can be for the beautiful riches and bounties provided to us by Mother Nature. We've got to do it, folks. We have to be committed. We have to understand that our Creator put us at the top of the food chain. We have the means to control the protection and conservation of our environment and to project that into the future. We have the means. We must muster the will not only of people like you and me, but people in Congress who hold the purse strings. They need to divert more funds to initiatives like all of you are engaged in. They need to be made aware of the fact that entities like the Chesapeake Conservancy and others are equipped to be partners even with the federal government. I have learned as chief of the Chickahominy Tribe, sometimes it makes more sense to hire a contractor who has specific skills as that skill set that's lacking in my office than for me to hire and develop someone to do it. It's less overhead. It makes sense to use existing resources that have those skill sets than to try, in my opinion, to create it with in your own space. That gives you more time to do the core work that you, in fact, were appointed to do. And I would suspect, Ms. O'Sullivan, you're not a person who has more time on your hands than you know to do with. So I would encourage people to reach out and grasp the talents and abilities that are out there to help complement your core duties and the vision that you have for moving ahead. And I just want to say, I feel so fortunate to know there are people like you, people I'm talking to today, who love Mother Nature as much as I do. I get up in the morning, walk outside. I say, wow, it's a great day to be alive. And that's regardless of rain, shine, sleet, or snow. It's great to be out there and look at this beautiful vistas afforded us by our Creator. And I have a final thought. You may think I'm radical, crazy, and stupid, but that's okay. Sometimes I am. Sometimes it takes extremism to bring people to where they need to be in their thinking. But have you ever thought of naming one of these buildings on this site after a diverse leader in this environmental movement? I think it would be fitting and very apt to do that. So as you move forward, I'd like for you to give it a lot of consideration so that when folks walk in here with different backgrounds, they can see that you're serious about wanting this to be a Black, brown, and white initiative. All of us together on that journey to make significant contributions to the overall conservation, preservation, and protection of these vast resources that we're entitled to. Chief Justice John Marshall was asked, to whom does this land belong? And he said, from a divine perspective, I think it belongs to the native people. He went on to say, I don't think they have the intellectual capacity to be good stewards of these vast natural resources. Oh, if he could come today and see what's happened as a result of the displacement, a lot of those folks he deemed intellectually incapable of being good stewards of this environment. Today, I look at people who are capable and are willing to be the stewards that the Creator has called us to be. I thank you for allowing me to speak with you today, and